Project 25. Is it something that Trump is endorsing? Is it something that he was for? He stated he was against it, but maybe there's other stuff in the mix. I'll get into it. Also, I'm going to be discussing the Chevron Doctrine and why it's one of the most important Supreme Court cases in modern history. And then we'll talk a little bit about the deep state and how they're afraid of a Trump presidency. Let's get into it.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
I don't want you to write. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the streets. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad.
Is the whole world gone crazy? Am I the only one around here who gives a shit about the rules?
You have the luxury of not knowing what I know.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
So it's another Thursday, and I'm coming on a little bit early today because I have family in from Jersey, and I want to spend some time with them. So, but I do have some things that I want to cover. I wasn't on last week because of 4th of July. I hope everybody had a wonderful Independence Day. I want to get into today Project 25, which is a topic that has been popping up recently, and my brother introduced me to it. I didn't even see it at first, but then I started seeing, of course, after he mentioned it to me, the posts were flying, and I started seeing it. So I looked up the doc. It is in the description of all platforms right now. So you should be able to, if you've been searching for the actual document because you're trying to get clarification, I have a direct link to it in the description. And that's on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So actually not Twitter yet because it doesn't give me the opportunity to put in that big a description. But I want to get into that. I also want to get into the Chevron Doctrine. It's the court case had passed some weeks ago, but I know many people are still asking questions about it, so I wanted to give some insight on that. Also, feel free to comment. I can post your comments from Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook. So if you have something you want to opine, throw in. Maybe there's something I missed or something you want to enlighten the rest of the folks on. By all means, let me know. Also, comment from where you're from. I love to see where everybody's watching from on the different platforms. So definitely give me that as well. It also helps the distribution of the video. And then lastly, with respect to wonderful t-shirts, gear, stuff like this, you can hit the Cause Patriot shop on my Etsy store. The link will be at thepatriotthinktank.com. And you can purchase any shirt you see me wearing on the broadcast. This particular one is one of my favorites. Make civics great again with the hashtag social studies sucks. But Yuri was right is another good one. There's quite a few. So definitely you can support the channel by going and making a purchase there. All right. And if you haven't followed, folks, just so you know, especially on Facebook, so I don't know what game Facebook has been playing, but when people follow the page, it doesn't register. And when people leave the page, it does register. So they haven't been letting anyone, at least from my statistics perspective, follow the page. So the more people that do so organically, the better off that page will be. They've been doing this to me for about 2 months now. I haven't really said anything about it because I'm really just happy that the X page is slowly growing. It's up to like 266 or so now, 264. So if you can follow me there, I would definitely appreciate it. That's the real target. That and the Rumble page are the two that I'm really trying to grow. Facebook, 18,000 followers was all well and great, but in the end, they don't let anybody see it. So they don't distribute it to anyone. When you get 56 impressions on a live event with 18,000 followers, it's like, all right, what really, from a distribution standpoint is the value in that. So I do want to grow those other channels, so you can help me out greatly for free by doing that simple action and clicking the follow and subscribe buttons on the other networks. All right, so Project 25. So a lot of hoopla about it. Obviously, the left is trying to argue that it is Trump's agenda, which it clearly is not. But it's when I read into it, I expected to see something creepier than I did. And I didn't read the full 900 pages, but I went through enough topics to see that what was being shown there and what was being proposed, it was not nearly as scary as is being made out. And I was curious, and I haven't read the whole thing, so I can't speak to the whole thing. However, you know, Trump's statement was some things in there were abysmal. And I was like, what exactly was abysmal? Like, I don't know what he was considering abysmal. I think the fact that he was being attacked on it, he assumed there was something worth attacking there, and then decided, he was not going to affiliate himself with it. I wouldn't affiliate myself either with it, so I get where he's coming from with that. But at the same time, I kind of look at it and say, well, at least read the document. And it's clear that Trump has not read this Project 25 document. So I don't want to speak on his behalf or overstate. However, it does appear that he not only was aware of it, but did say some incriminating stuff as far as his statement that, he's against it for whatever reason. And I say that because that the video clip that is now going around, which it has been edited, so I guess you could say someone could come out with it or some magical stuff said in between, but sounds like it was edited within context. But I could be wrong. It could come out that the full video of that shows that he was bashing it all in between the edit. But it sounds like he was somewhat in favor of it. Here's the quote or the video clip that was going on with him speaking back in 2022. And keep in mind when you watch the clip, Heritage Foundation released Project 25 in 2023. So when you hear him say it's coming soon, well, it was, and it did.
Our country is going to hell. The critical job of institutions such as Heritage is to lay the groundwork, and Heritage does such an incredible job at that. This is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America. And that's coming. That's coming.
All right. So it sounds like he was very aware of what this was in 2022, that he wasn't particularly against it. But to be honest, when I read through it, I don't know. There are things that I'm opposed to on it, but they're all process oriented. They're not like the morality of what they're saying is 100% legitimate. Now, I know Trump is not a conservative, so maybe he does disagree with some of these things, but I would like to know what. And that's, he came out, some of the things in there are abysmal, and it's like, well, what are those things? Because I wasn't seeing them. And again, I didn't read the full 900 pages at this point, so I can't, maybe there is some, but I started reading the leftist attacks on it, and the stuff they were pointing to was just misleading and wrong. So I don't know exactly where he was going with that, and I'm curious to know. But because what I see from it, it almost seems like it's something that should be. It's almost like the left was able to get conservatives to trash their own beliefs, just because they tried to say Trump's affiliated with this, and Trump by knee jerk reacted and said, no, I have nothing to do with this, which he doesn't have anything to do with the creation or anything like that of it. But I feel like by doing that and then having him react like that, now there are there are at least millions of conservatives out there bashing Project 25, when really it was just some think tank's conception of what the world should be like, and from a conservative perspective, right? They're a conservative think tank, so they're basically just laying out what the world should be like. Now they do they speak in that doctrine in a way that is somewhat, I don't know, it's lacking humility, right? They're speaking with some hubris. I guess they talk about they did this in 1979 and gave it to President Ronald Reagan. And when you read it, like the current one, it's just an outline of generic. The front face of it is an outline of generic conservative principles. Now they get specific in some areas, but even then, it's not that far off from conservative principles. They do the way they suggest things be implemented, suggesting executive orders in some cases and things like that are definitely disturbing to me. Being someone who's republic minded, and want to see things operate the way the republic should. I don't like the encouragement of executive orders for virtually anything. So there are things like that in there that I found disturbing. But Trump himself, clearly he knew about it. Clearly, he when he first looked at it, did not find it repulsive in any way, but now is sort of distancing himself from it. And I think it's fair for us to ask what parts, as conservatives, what parts are you distancing yourself from? Right? Because, he's clearly not on the conservative mindset. He there's a lot of things in his policies that are things that conservatives would like. So, it's all good there. He does drift from, on the abortion issue, he drifts on a few issues where it's not necessarily, his fiscal policy, his general belief that the government is a force for good and just being run by the wrong people, and that if the right people run it, it can be this great force for good. That is not a conservative belief. The conservatives, if you're considering yourself conservative, and it's fine if you don't, but if you're considering yourself conservative, you at least have to acknowledge that the federal government is to be something that there should be a healthy fear of at all times, regardless of who's in the presidency or who's in the Congress or who's in the courts. It is something to always be feared. It is not a force for good. It is a necessary evil. That is the fundamental core principle of the founders. It's the fundamental, when they created the federal government, that was their fear. That's why they put in things like Article 5, because they understood the corrupt nature of centralized government. But I don't believe Trump believes that way. I think he thinks that as long as he's in charge, the government can do a lot of good. So, there are those things that kind of break him from conservatism. But again, his policies right now are the best we're going to get, right? It's the best, it's the most aligned with us that we're going to get. He'll be strong on foreign policy, and he'll be strong on the border. Those are two things he can change, and those are two things he will change, right? And energy independence, that's something he can greatly influence. So, that's another piece. Beyond that, there's not much any president can do, right? He's not going to be able to get the things done that we're looking to get done with an Article 5 convention. That's just not his fault. That's the presidency, right? But they're tagging him with this Project 25, and I just want people to know that, number one, don't go bashing Project 25. It makes you look silly. Read it before you bash it, okay? Because when you read it, you're going to be like, well, this isn't that bad at all. Now, if you're like me, you'll have some civics problems with it in the way that they want to adjudicate things. Whereas I say, regulations, and we'll get into this in a little bit with the Chevron Doctrine, but, where I turn around and say regulations should never be created by a regulatory agency, because regulations are laws. I mean, that's what they are. They're laws. We can sit here and pretend that they're something else, but they're not. They're laws. So I don't want to. It's funny. I'm looking at. Sorry, I got a look of me just like sitting there on the back screen, and I'm not sure what that was all about, but it was making it look like what streaming is not what I'm saying. So if you're seeing any issue, let me know. I want to make sure that I address that as quickly as possible. All of these streams seem to be falling behind in what I'm seeing to what you guys are seeing, so I want to make sure that you're getting what you should be getting. All right, sounds good. So anyway, when it comes to Project 25, read it. I left you the link in the descriptions of pretty much all of the pretty much all of the here. All right, I'll try and get it over to X. X doesn't let you put that type of description in for your videos, so I didn't really have the ability to do that. But I did want to. I do want everyone to know the link is there. So read it for yourself. I don't expect you to sit down and read the full, the full doctrine. So, and now I got someone commenting saying Facebook may not be good. No, actually, I just pulled up Facebook and it looks okay. So even the subtitles are following me along. Not even a lot of lag. So I think it's pretty. All right. So but anyway, click the link, read through it. You're gonna find, Heritage Foundation is not a controversial foundation. Those are the guys. I recently did a video with their president who was invited to the WEF. He went in there and tore these guys open and kind of, ripped them one. So they're good people, right? Good minded people, good hearted people, etc. And okay, I have issues with my comments coming through there. Not sure what. Gonna have. So if you're leaving comments, I will go and check individually to see, because I was seeing some comments come up, and I think it was in the group from Facebook, and I don't think I see those comments. Those comments don't make it to me. They have to be from the page. So if you are watching from the Patriot Think Tank group, if you go over to the page, I should be able to read your comments there. Let me see if yes. Yes. If you go to the page, I will be and view the video there. I will be able to see stuff. Let me check Twitter. Dun, dun, dun. This is what happens when you are your own producer. Me, myself, and I am not seeing the Twitter stuff come up. So that may be an issue. As far as I want to take a look at Rumble. Either. So maybe I have to recalibrate settings here, folks. I'm not sure what's going on. So I'm not getting some of the comments from Rumble or Twitter. Only Facebook seems to be coming up. Not sure why. But I will work on that technical difficulty next time. So just back on topic, I just want to make sure you guys read it for yourself. Trump probably should be talking well of Project 25, from what I can read. The reasons the left hate it, there were certain reasons, and I did make some notes here about that. So like, they make comments like this: the next conservative president, he must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. That's like common sense and very generic. But here's where it gets creepy, where they're like, this starts with deleting the terms sexual orientation, gender identity, diversity, equity, inclusion, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sense, abortion, like deleting the terms. So like that's where, you got to look into this and be like, I kind of get what they're saying, but I don't know where they're going with the federal government deleting those terms. Like the terminology they use throughout this document is flawed, to say the least. For an organization that really does nothing but this, right? That for them to not be able to word this in a way that's not disturbing to everybody, like not just on the what it's saying, but on the civics of what it's saying. It's a little bit. I mean, they say pornography should be outlawed, like. like there's an element, right? It's like when people say, why does evil exist in the world, when God is good? And in the explanation of saying, if people don't have the choice to do evil, then it's not really love when we say that they love God, because you have to love him, right? Like if you were to create a world where, everything was good and no evil ever happened, or yeah, and everybody loved God, then he's making you love God. You're not loving him on your, it's not love, right? If I force your wife to marry you, is that really a legit marriage, right? It's like there's an element of this where you've got to allow the choice for evil. You cannot eradicate evil in the world, because there will be no good in the world if that is the case. If you don't have a choice to make, if you don't have an opportunity to make a bad choice, then there's nothing good about making a good choice. Like the whole, that's the entire point of the entire thing. So while I may agree that pornography is bad, and people shouldn't watch it and things like that, you can't outlaw it in that way. It's not even like they said outlaw it for children. They just said outlaw it. It's like it's not okay to do that sort of stuff in the great American experiment. That is not okay. No matter how good it sounds on the front face of it. And so, you know, even when it comes to regulatory agencies, what they're saying in Project 25, they quote it as this. It says, let's be clear, the most egregious regulations promulgated by the current administration come from one place, the Oval Office. The president cannot hide behind the agencies, as his many executive orders make clear. His is the responsibility for regulations that threaten American communities, schools, and families. Let me finish this. So he says, a conservative president must move swiftly to do away with these vast abuses of presidential power and remove the career and political bureaucrats who fuel it. And my answer was wrong. The solution is to do away with the regulatory agencies altogether. Like the idea that he should manage them differently is just not correct. They should not be in existence. They have no place. The Constitution does not allow for them. The courts have allowed for them, but the courts are wrong. And this is a big part about what Article 5 movement is all about, is just eliminating these agencies. I mean, they go on to talk about how the Department of Education is polluting our education system with all of these different things. And I'm like, in the end, it's not about what the Department of Education is doing or not doing. It's about the Department of Education existing. There's just nowhere. And the 10th Amendment is clear. There's nowhere in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to get involved in any way, shape, or form with education. Nowhere. Nowhere. There's nowhere in there that authorizes the federal government to regulate the environment. There's nowhere in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to regulate labor, to regulate urban housing. These are all made up entities and arms and powers that the federal government just simply doesn't have. And we have been operating under the illusion that it does have these powers for an awfully long time. And as if these regulatory agencies are somehow a force for good in some way. They are not. The Department of Education destroys the quality of education. Destroys it. The EPA harasses and friggin' steals land from law-abiding citizens who are doing nothing other than not bending the knee to a regulatory agency. It's the labor. What is OSHA doing, right? This is an organization for work safety that suddenly became a weapon to throw people out of employment and lose jobs for people for not bending to its will. These are not organizations that have authority, like true authority. Now, they've been granted the right to exist through legislation, but they don't have authority. And Project 25 kind of wants to tinker with this and says we should manage it differently, whereas the reality is we should get rid of it altogether. And so, there are things about Project 25 that are not necessarily perfect, not necessarily good. And maybe those are the things that Trump found to be an abomination. I don't know. What I do know is that I have no idea whether he does seem to have supported this in the past. even though he says now he never did. He did apparently, but but the fact of the matter is, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. And I'm a little bit bugged out that like the general premise, I'm watching otherwise patriotic conservative individuals bash the project as if its morals were incorrect, or as if like if there was a need to distance yourself from it. Like you could acknowledge it and acknowledge its general theme, and clearly state that this is no agenda. This is not my agenda, right? Like this, and even when they argue they gave this to President Reagan, they're like, well, who followed 60% of it, he says, and I'm like, you followed 60% of it. 60% of what's in there is like generic conservative principles. So it's like, of course he followed. Any Republican president or conservative-minded president would follow 60%. And of course, even that 60% is by Heritage's definition, not mine. Scott Morris, how are you, sir? It's been way too long. It has been way too long, and I am glad you're here as well. So anyway, that's my point about Project 25. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It is definitely flawed, but it's not like egregious in any way. And why the president runs from it because the left is saying you want to do that. Just say it's not my agenda. Here's my agenda, which you clearly have on your website. Here's my agenda. That's not my agenda. But I got to be honest, there's not much wrong with what they're saying. The moral ground on what they're speaking is fine. And it is. From a conservative point of view, what they're talking about in Project 25 is fine. My issues are with the way they want to implement things, which I don't particularly care for. But otherwise, I mean, what they're saying, like the goals that they're trying to reach, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. It just isn't. So, like, in the end, don't let yourself get consumed. Just because the left is attacking Trump with something doesn't mean it's bad. Like, actually look into it. Read some of it. The link, again, for the full Project 25, which was written by Heritage Foundation, not Donald Trump, for those who think it was written by Trump, right? It's the link to it is in the description. It's the PDF. You can actually read it. It's 900 pages, so I don't expect you to fully read the whole thing. But when you hear someone say, it says this, it's good to go to it, pull it up, do a Control F, look up the term that the person's saying it says, and then get the context right? Like, that's worth doing. That everybody should be doing. If someone says, it says this, they're claiming this, he believes this. But what does it actually say? You just open up the document, Control F on your keyboard, and just type in whatever they're saying he said, and see where it is, and read the whole context. More than likely, if you see it on the internet, it was taken out of proportion or out of context, right? And we want to avoid that. We want to avoid that as much as possible. So, all right, the second piece that I wanted to go over, all right, was the recent ruling by the Supreme Court regarding the Chevron Doctrine. So, if you're not familiar with the Chevron Doctrine, I'm going to go over a very high level of it. Okay, was that Chevron was attacked by a regulatory agency for violation of policies that Chevron felt were not policies. And what happened is this went to court. The language that was actually written in the mandates to the regulatory agency were vague, as they often are when they're written to regulatory agencies. And the regulatory agencies were claiming that, well, when it's vague, we have the ability, the authority to interpret it and act accordingly. And the court, for some bizarre freaking reason, this was back in, I believe, 1984, went ahead and said, yes, when it is vague, you have the ability, regulatory agency, to define what your power is under that statement, which was never the case before. Before, it had to go to the court. The court would determine whether there was a suitable interpretation, and if there wasn't, then it had to go back to Congress, and they had to rewrite it or add clarity or do whatever. So ever since that day, government regulation has expanded exponentially because it just literally gave carte blanche to all regulatory agencies to be able to interpret anywhere where vague language existed. And you know how these bills are written. So they were all just going haywire with their interpretations of these statutes. And that's supposedly all over now. The Supreme Court has ruled that that's not the case. They can no longer do that. If there is ambiguity in what a rule states, then and a rule but from Congress to the regulatory agency, not from the regulatory agency to a person or entity, that the courts will decide what the meaning is. And if they cannot come to a meeting because it's that vague, then it will go back to Congress to be rewritten and added clarity to. And that sounds like a win, and it is to some degree. But in the end, I don't even like the idea of regulatory agencies being able to put together any regulation. Enforcing a regulation, which is a law, because they're punishable. So if they're creating law, that's a problem. Now, if Congress creates a law and uses the regulatory agency as an arm to enforce a law clearly written by Congress, that's different. But that's not what we have. These regulatory agencies, unelected officials, nobody accountable, and this is why the government likes them, right? Number one, it's a way for the executive to go for a power grab because most of the orders given to these regulatory agencies are coming from him, right? Most, and I don't mean just Biden, I mean just presidents in general. Most of the orders that come to these regulatory agencies that eventually get enforced upon you are from the president. Right? Just look at the most recent, mask mandates and the most recent vaccine mandates. That all came from the president. That didn't come from Congress. Congress had nothing to do with that. That was the president giving an order to OSHA to fire you. That's what that was. That talk about expansion of power. And it's wrong. And I was one of those people who was about to get fired. The Supreme Court came through right in the nick of time, but like in the end, if they didn't, I'd have been fired. And my point to this is these regulatory agencies shouldn't have any of these powers. And the fact that when you look at how this court interpreted it, and Gorsuch in Gorsuch's defense, he did clarify that they don't have these authorities in a previous decision on the vaccine mandates in his dominant opinion, in the approving opinion. But I don't know for 100% where the rest sit. And the fact of the matter is, I don't want this to be an issue for the courts. Like this is why I advocate Article 5, because the regulatory agencies just need to be shut down and never allowed to return. And that can be put into a constitutional amendment on government overreach immediately. As soon as we get this convention called, that can easily be put in to just eliminate them altogether. We don't need federal agencies to do what states can do. There's no the federal government's jobs are pretty simple. They're pretty simple. And I've heard the argument, well, we need regulatory agencies because there's too much on the plates of congressmen and this and that. No, there isn't. When we get back to the 10th Amendment, there really isn't going to be much on their plate at all. The problem is they've got their fingers in like 20 different things that they shouldn't be in. And in the end, they're supposed to provide for the common defense. Yes, they have taxing capabilities. However, the idea that this Supreme Court tradition of Congress and the president having wide latitude with taxation needs to end and needs clarification. And that can also happen under an Article 5 convention under the fiscal restraints topic. Right? But in the end, to shut these regulatory agencies down, it requires constitutional amendment. Everything that we need to fix the structural damage of our federal government requires to be clarified in constitutional amendment because it's the courts, not previous governments, who have administered the power to this federal government. It is through their rulings that they can get away with things as quote unquote constitutional when in fact they are not. And the fact that the courts keep following precedent means you're going to end up with bad decisions all the way through. Jack, how are you, sir? Over on Facebook, I think Trump was done. I'm only getting comments from Facebook right now, folks, so my apologies to those on Rumble and Twitter. I don't know what the issue is, but I'm working on it for the next broadcast. So I think Trump was looking forward to it in the past, which to me did not constitute supporting it. That could be, look, I don't think I'll tell you this, Jack. I think we could agree that Trump's never read this 900-page document. I don't think Trump's read any 900-page document in the past 50 years. And that's not saying he's stupid. It's saying it's a 900-page document on someone else's theory of how the country should be run. And I don't know many people outside of the Heritage Organization who are reading that whole thing. You know what I mean? And so when you look at it, it's like, all right, he's I mean, I could get into this, into more deep. I know you just commented that that was meant for the first segment, but that's fine. I got time, and people are commenting, and I'm going to jump on it. So, but I mean, in the end, I think he should support it. Is kind of what I'm saying for the most part, at least on the moral angle of it. As far as like how they want to implement things and stuff like that, and I got more of it to read. I mean, I skimmed through, maybe 500 pages of it. When I say skim through, I was looking for, keyword terms and things like that. And it wasn't a deep dive. But I mean, when you do that though, you kind of get the feeling for the same theme and where they're going with it. And that there didn't seem to be anything particularly creepy except the way that they wanted to administer stuff. But Trump does those things himself, like executive orders and whatnot. So it's hard for me to even. It's a big nothing burger, is what it is. But I don't think people. I guess I just want people to not be triggered by it and start bashing it, like because it's like you're bashing. It's almost like they're making you hit yourself. so that's where I'm getting at. But good to hear from you, Jack. But with the back to the Chevron Doctrine and Article 5 and all that. When it comes to the court making a decision where regulatory agencies can no longer, we'll see how this plays out, right? But when they can no longer just interpret things and start getting creative with what they can and can't do, that should help to slow down the process with respect to the growth of government at that level. But it doesn't heal the process from the bastardization that it already is. And that's why I went into Article 5 again, to say this is where this Article 5 is the only solution to our problems. It's it. And it doesn't matter, if you say, oh, well, it doesn't cover, this particular convention doesn't cover all the topics that we need. And it doesn't cover them all, but it covers term limits, fiscal restraints, and government overreach. And those are big topics. They're broad. We can do a lot with them, and we're not going to get everything we want ratified under them. But the sheer action of being, like, in other words, if we get in and we say, all right, government overreach, and we shut down the Board of Education and a few others, but we don't get them all, right? But we shut those down, right? And then the bottom line is we can call another convention to go further with it if that type of consensus exists. And that's the thing. It requires a ton of consensus. So it's not like any craziness is you need 38 states to ratify this. All right. That means, all right, that 13 individual chambers, there are 99 chambers throughout the 50 states, each chamber being like House and Senate is 2 chambers, right? Nebraska has 1. So there's 99 across the United States. Only 13 of them have to shut down the ratification in order for it to not happen. So there will be broad consensus on anything that gets through. And most things that I think will get through, all right, regulatory agencies will get a backslap. How hard that backslap is, I don't know. I don't know. It's going to depend on how people engage their local governments. Because I could tell you right now, if your district representative knows that he's gone, if he votes against ratification for an amendment that you want, and there are enough people that agree, he's going to vote to ratify it. Or if there's something that you don't want, and he hears that there are enough, like it's easier to move the needle with local representatives than it is with national figures. That's and yeah, exactly, Jackson. Even if we get one, we win, right? Because the process matters, right? It's the process. Like if we go through this all and let's say all we get, we'll get term limits, but let's say all we get are term limits and fiscal restraints, and we can't get a single subject amendment for bills, and we can't get an overturn of the 16th Amendment, and we can't get an overturn of the 17th. Like we can't get any of that. So we just get term limits and a balanced budget. Let's say we got nothing. It's still getting through the process is an incredibly empowering piece for the American people. It changes the dynamic of the way the government's relationship with the people will work forevermore. The people will fully understand that if there's something happening that is truly unanimous, in how people feel about it, and the government's going the wrong way on it, we can call a convention, and when we do, the government will respond. Because if there's anything the government would rather legislate itself than be legislated upon by the people directly. And the government has no say in the amendment process. And that's the beautiful part about it. Federal government has zero say in the process, which is why they fear it so greatly. And when we get from 19 to 23, 24, 25, when they come in bunches, it's like these long dead periods, and then bang, 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 we get like 3 or 4. When that happens again, you can rest assured that they will notice, all right? And they'll notice because they know that this is an incredible threat to their power. People say, oh, the people aren't in control anymore. It's all an illusion. It's this, and that's not an illusion. What's an illusion is that you're not in control. That's the illusion. The illusion is that you don't have control over your destiny, because you do. You do. And when people give you the jazz like all empires fall and the cyclical and blah, 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 there has never been, first of all, we're not an empire. If we were, we would own the world right now after World War II. We could have literally taken over everything. Instead of taking everything over, we rebuilt everyone. Yeah, and no empire has ever done that in the history of the world. And the reason they haven't, and the reason that we haven't, is because we are not an empire. All right, and that's clear. We are unlike anything the world has ever seen. The great American experiment continues to evolve. We've evolved with an additional 17 amendments after the invoking of our Constitution, and there will be more to come. This experiment goes on and on and on, and there will need to be amendments on AI, controlling people's privacy versus tech generation, etc. There are defense mechanisms that will be put in place via the Constitution, one way or the other, and that way is going to be through amendment. And the only way those amendments get through is through a convention of states. And yet here we have the majority of patriotic Americans not even knowing what it is, how it works, or worse yet, being scared of it. So, there's an element of this where people just have to educate themselves, right? We need to make civics great again, right? That's what we need to do. Civics is not being taught to us in the school systems that we pay for. We need to go learn it. We need to go understand it. We need to go understand where the power lies and how we flex that power when we need to. And because we've been going about it wrong the last 50, 60 years, one president after another, thinking that's where the change is. That's not where the change is. The change is in your local legislature. That's where the change is. Control that with authority, and you will control the nation with authority. That's truth. That's just fact. That's just truth. Control your state legislatures with authority, and you will control the federal government with authority. And that's just something that everybody needs to be able to comprehend. Now, lastly, I wanted to talk about some good news. And you might have seen this, because this one I've been holding on to for a while, because with the debates and then 4th of July 2 weeks later, I missed 2 episodes that I haven't been able to get out the information. But the deep state is scared. And it's not just like us saying, the deep state is scared and ha ha ha, we're winning. Like, they're really scared. And so much so that they've begun the narrative as to how to react upon a Trump victory. Because let's face it, folks, they've been weaponizing the government. It's plain for anybody to see. There's all kinds they went all in on not letting Trump win the presidency. All in. And when you go all in like that, there's risk, because if you lose, you broke a lot of laws. You broke a lot of laws, and there's good reason to be scared. And so when I'm going to show you this clip from an MSNBC interview, and it has McCobb, who is the former deputy of the FBI, talking about how he's legitimately like thinking about leaving the country.
It's terrifying. It's frightening. I have a lot of conversations with former colleagues, people who are or were in the intelligence and law enforcement community and may have worked in, the Obama administration, other places. And, people are really trying to assess, like, what is life going to be like if Donald Trump wins a second term? And on a very personal level, I mean, these are torturous discussions with their family members about whether or not they have to leave the country to avoid being unconstitutionally and illegally detained. I mean, people are actually worried about being thrown in jail or grabbed in some sort of extrajudicial detention.
Okay, so extrajudicial detention. So they're starting this narrative now. And even the interviewer there was like kind of shocked when he was like, on a personal level, I'm like, determining whether I need to leave the country and this and that. So just so he knows, all right, and that's Andrew McCobb again, just so he knows, yeah, he should be scared, number one. Number two, they've broken laws up and down the chain. Once the president has access to the documents, it's going to be undeniable. Comey is going to be in a heap of crap. Biden will be safe. Biden will be safe mostly because of the latest Supreme Court ruling, which everyone was talking about in terms of Trump, but it's going to apply to Biden too, and there's not going to be any charges brought against Biden for anything. Whether you think that's good or not, I don't know. I think it's actually good. I think the transfer of power needs to be peaceful, and as much as we may be disgusted, I'm all for arresting everybody around Biden and leaving Biden. I don't want to become South Korea, where it's normal practice for a new president to jail the former president, and this goes on back and forth all the time. That's not a way to run a republic. It's just not. So, I mean, I'm for it on both sides. I don't think that acts of, that a president does as president, are something that you're going to prosecute him civilly for or criminally for after his office. It's going to create an environment where presidents are afraid to act, are afraid to take, and it's going to destroy the peaceful transfer of power. It's just there's more to lose than there is to gain there. However, people like McCobb and Comey and what's his name, the dude that's in charge of Homeland Security right now, DHS. Garland, that's it. So anyway, these people, there's going to be a house of cards in deep state that gets destroyed. And I've said this once, I've said it, I'll say it again. I'd love to see the president bring in freaking Giuliani to head the DOJ, or bring in DeSantis to head the DOJ, and just take the leash off him and let him go wild. And just let them friggin' take down everybody. Because that entire organization needs to be freaking brought down and reconfigured in far less. Like, we don't need CIA, NSA, DARPA, we don't need all of them. We don't. And the idea that it's okay in their culture to spy on citizens, like, that entire culture needs to be destroyed. All of it. And it's about to get that way. And he knows it. And McCobb is scared. So now they're starting this narrative on MSNBC shows and things like that, so that they can go back and reference it later. Like, we knew this would happen. We knew Trump would want revenge and this and that. And I'll be straight, there's going to be an element of this that Trump absolutely enjoys. Let us not get it twisted. But the fact of the matter is, they're going to be guilty. So there's not going to be any extra judicial circumstances, as McCobb suggests, as if they're going to have to go beyond the judicial system or beyond, legality to arrest these people. And that's just not the case. There's going to be such a windfall of information to put these people behind bars for very long times. And he knows it, and they're scared, and that's something that should comfort everybody. That's something that every American should be like, good, good. Let's rip this, because the rest of the world, they define us by our deep state's actions. They don't realize that the people can't stand the deep state. Like people in Europe, or not even Europe, but those nations that we really toy with, right? There's plenty of nations in Africa, Middle East, right? I mean, we've been doing it for so long, right? Eastern Europe, we've been doing it for so long. And there are so many people who can't stand Americans because they can't stand our government, and have no idea that we can't stand our government either. No idea. And that they'll identify as victims. Yeah, that's what they're right. That's what they're doing. They're setting the stage to make it look like, they're afraid. They're just patriots trying to protect the nation. And there's an evil boogeyman out there who's running for president, and he's gonna come and get us. Right? When in the end, McCobb is the he's the evil boogeyman, right? Garland is the evil boogeyman. Comey is the evil boogeyman. These are the people that give the orders to send SWAT units to a guy's house when he's there with his 10-year-old daughter, throwing flashbangs in his living room over an issue that they could have just called him about, and he would have came in. But that doesn't happen, right? And he's not the only one. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of American citizens who were attacked this way over charges like, trespassing. Really multiple versions of the same thing. Biden live on BBC England talking shite. Love it. As usual, Trump needs to get back in. Simple as that. Yeah. I mean, look, Carl, are you in the UK? I'm curious. But yeah, look, no one's listening. I think everyone got the message with the debates of Biden's condition. The fact that there were people shocked about it. Like at first I thought this has to be false shock. But I came to realize like these people really, really did believe that like the president, like they just thought it was right-wing conspiracy saying how stupid he is and clever editing or whatever the hell they thought. I don't know, but they really believed that. Yeah. So Carl in London. Okay, cool. Yeah. When I heard the BBC reference, I was like, that sounds like an overseas follower to me. But yeah, get used. I mean, no one here in the States has taken Biden seriously after the debates, Carl. So I would say most of us didn't take him seriously before. I mean, we know this country's been getting run by some puppet government for the past 3 years because Biden was in bad shape when he got elected. Well, when he got elected, right? So the idea that he got 80 million votes and was not in a cognitive state worth speaking about, right? It was in a very concerning cognitive state. It was concerning in the first place. And it's, but people forget Biden lifted 2 sanctions in January 22, which both led to the 2 wars. Yeah, no, the Ukraine one in particular, like that one I talk about all the time, Carl, and I can tell you, look, when Trump comes in saying, I can end this conflict in 1 day, and that's the only statement he makes that makes me think that he actually understands what's going on there, because every other statement he makes doesn't make me think he understands what's going on there. But the fact of the matter is he can end it in 1 day. Like if he because Putin's not asking for anything crazy. Like he's not asking for anything off the chain. He wants a guarantee that Ukraine will never be in NATO. That's a softball. That's a complete softball. All right. Like if that's all it takes to end the dying, then we're in. And he doesn't want to give back any land annexed. And I'm like, well, most of that land, maybe some of it is not, but the majority of that land, the people living there aren't all that upset about being a part of Russia. And I'm sure that it's mixed in some cases, but there are a lot of people in Ukraine and obviously I'm not speaking for everyone in Crimea and other areas, but like the fact of the matter is, Crimea, for one, they're cool with it. They look at the Ukrainian government as a puppet government for the United States. So they're not, they had no problem. Like, this is so easy to end the killing. It's so easy to end the killing. So if he wants to do that, he can. Now, as far as the Israel Hamas thing, you know, with that mess, it's really a matter of time before. I mean, Hamas waits for a weak president and then they go in. That's pretty much every time we get a weak president, you know, as far as foreign policy is concerned, Hamas does. Or if it's not Hamas, it's ISIS or, you know, whoever the hot ticket of the day is. But the Middle East goes apeshit every time we have a weak president. That's 100% true. And so, you know, would Hamas have done this if Trump was in the office? No, I don't think they would have. Only because he's so unpredictable. He's so unpredictable. Like they truly, like world leaders have talked about this after he's left office. It was like, you know, you really don't know, you know, what he'll do. You don't know how he'll react. Like when he says anything's on the table, they believe him. When Biden says anything's on the table, people giggle. Like it's like, no, it's not. You know, they know that you know he's not speaking on behalf of the United States, and you know he's reading off a cue card that somebody else wrote for him, and you know, like nobody takes Biden seriously, including the people of the United States of America. Nobody. This man, you know, and his wife, with a special place in hell there will be for her, for parading this man around for 3 years like a circus animal, you know, just so she could be in the White House with him, is disgusting beyond all comprehension. But I mean, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. But they're scared now. I mean, they know that you know, Trump gets in office, there are going to be, like he did this the first time, clearly did not have any idea of how, you know, how structurally damaged and corrupt the federal government is. He clearly had no idea. And it ate him alive, right up to the election and throwing him out of office. It ate him alive, and then continued to persecute him after he was gone. People who surely were telling him he's the greatest thing, he's the greatest thing, he's the greatest thing, and then just stabbed him as soon as he turned around. Anybody who tells Trump that he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, they're in the circle, like they're in the, you know. And I hope to God he learned from that, but I don't think. I think he's still vulnerable to that. I think, you know, there are still people that could get in his circle. He has a terrible history of choosing people around him. And you know, in the end, there are still people, I think, who can penetrate his circle to do him damage. And we'll see how that plays out. I mean, we have to hope that he's better, you know, than he was. And that he learned enough from that first run, just exactly what he's dealing with and what it's going to take to, you know, to really protect the country and really do as much as a president can do to clean things up. Again, it's still up to the American people. Like, if you think you can vote your way out of tyranny, you're insane. You just simply cannot. Trump will come, Trump will go, DeSantis can come in after him, and you know, somebody great after that. And in the end, we will still be running up ridiculous deficits. We will still, you know, the structural damage. Congressmen will still be insider trading like crazy, going in poor, coming out millionaires. Like all of that stuff will still continue to happen unless the people of the United States call this convention. I mean, in the end, that's truth. But what Trump can do, he can secure the border. He can correct relations with China. And when I say correct, I mean set the record straight and step into a stance of dominance with China. He can end the war in Ukraine in a day. That's an easy fix. Easy fix. And so there are things that he can do, but he cannot fix the structural damage of this nation. He just can't. Wow, that's an essay. All right, so you can't read the top, folks, but it says in some ways, let me try and get this down to in some ways it's the privileged that are in support of Biden. It's the less fortunate who Biden and his rhetoric claim to care about. that understand this pain because it's caused by the administration. Take the Congo, for example. There's an example. Biden immediately removed the logistics put in place by Trump to allow them to create wealth. Yeah, there's not gonna there's the illusion is what it is, right? If anybody's still under the illusion that the Democratic Party, for whatever it's worth, or the Republican Party for that matter, care about individuals. Even they don't care about anyone but themselves. I mean, that's the culture that we've created there. They didn't get into politics to serve. They got in as a career choice. And that's what we look to end with term limits, right? That's what we look to end with term limits, is this whole career choice thing. Like, it is not a career. It is service. And hence term limits need to be implemented for that purpose. Because number one, term limits. Number two, like serious implications for insider trading. Like serious implications for insider trading. This is where, when the incentive to go to Congress is no longer money, which it is now, and maybe you think this is all Democrats that do this insider trading, you're wrong. It's almost the entire Congress. There are 100 people, not one or two, 100 Republicans who voted for the latest Ukrainian spending bill. 100 House members who absolutely turned their back on their constituents, because no conservative constituents support the war in Ukraine. They just don't. It's as wildly unpopular as anything can be. The idea that we are in this inflation situation where every single thing at the grocery store, everyone in every class is affected, and the fact of the matter is we decide to continue to increase inflation by supporting these proxy wars, which too many people understand now are just money laundering operations for weapons manufacturers and politicians. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene's a perfect example. Bought a ton of Boeing, Lockheed Martin, other defense was it Raytheon or whatever? All of this stock she bought right days before the Ukraine war broke out. All right, and so when it comes time to spend more money on Ukraine, and Ukraine's a special animal because the money laundering scheme usually works like it did in Israel, where we give Israel billions of dollars in aid. Israel then takes those billions of dollars, spends them back in the United States as weapons purchases, and now the money has been laundered. And so in the case of Ukraine, it's worse because we're not only giving them billions, but we're giving them the weapons so we're buying the weapons and we're giving them money. It's just insane. All this while inflation is at record highs. Like, they just don't care about you. Even your politician in the federal government does not care about you. And you need to understand that. And if you think you have one who does care about you and you want to vote that person in, understand there's a 95% chance that 6 months after that person is in, they will no longer care about you either. That's why they're like diapers. They need to be changed often. And term limits are what will do that. Term limits are the safeguard to make sure that gets done. And that these constant buses look at the friggin', you look at, why is his name? McConnell. You look at McConnell and the state he represents, it's such a small portion of the American population, but this guy has immense power within Congress. Even though he couldn't speak, he was falling into trances and whatnot, but he was still having immense power in the federal government as Senate Majority Leader or Minority Leader, depending on whether we were. But the point of the matter is, this guy was in districts. This guy was representing a state that was small, and when it's small, it's easier to manipulate. You don't encourage people to vote. You send in a lot of busing. This is how the House always gets dominated in certain ways, because they're small elections and they're easy to manipulate. Now, when you say that, they're also easy to manipulate for good. It's just that people don't pay attention to local elections, and they don't pay attention to their local representatives. And as a result, small groups of people friggin' vote for them. And so small groups of people can swing the election. Instead of using that as an empowering moment, we we allow it to continue where they're the ones influencing the elections. I mean, it's just imperative that we understand how this system works and how we take control of it, because it matters. Like decisions like the Chevron Doctrine, those are all well and good, but like that's a court. And that was a court having to overturn a previous court. So there's very good chance that if a leftist bench takes place before we call this convention, like they're going to totally upend the Constitution. The stuff that Sotomayor. All right, I'm done. The stuff that she and the leftist doos on the court, even with Ginsburg when she was in there, like the stuff that they'll vote in favor of is insanity. Like they have a core belief that the court should rewrite the Constitution essentially through interpretation, that it's a living document that gets changed by them. That's not how it is. But it will be awfully hard to stop if we don't solidify these things in the Constitution in very clear, broad, and sweeping language. So, I mean, that's, depending on SCOTUS, right, has gotten us the Chevron Doctrine since 1984. So for 40 years, we had to sit. Not okay. Not okay. Right? And so the courts are really, when we talk about Article 5, when we talk about constitutional amendment, it's not presidents or Congress that we're trying to deal with here. It's failed court decisions that we're trying to deal with here. It's important that people see it that way, because that's how it is. It's not previous presidents that have caused this country to go haywire. It's the courts. And it matters. And every amendment that gets put in is clarification to a previous court decision. Like having an amendment clarifying the Commerce Clause after the Supreme Court just bastardized it. Not just bastardized it like right now, but throughout has bastardized it. This notion that Congress should automatically get incredible leeway, to quote them, as when it comes to taxes. Nonsense. Nonsense. And these are things that we can address, and they don't all have to be addressed in one convention, but the convention has to take place. It has to get through. The process has to be completed. So now it's law. Now, and when I say law, I mean now the process is embedded. It's now a thing. It's never been completed before. So there are people trying to scare people about it. There are people who are trying to act like it's going to go haywire and all this nonsense. All of that goes away, and this process becomes a lot faster. A lot faster. Right? So if you haven't already, please make sure, aside from following the page, and follow me on X, all right? That's also important. But if you haven't signed the petition for your district, all right, in with Convention of States, then do that. Do that at least as a starting point to at least let yourself be heard. And I would highly recommend that you click the volunteer button, even if the only thing you can volunteer is a social media warrior, and you just can help communicate it on Facebook and other Instagram, etc. Like please, that's an enormous help. That's an enormous help. Right now, what's needed most is education. What's needed, and they will educate you on all these topics as well, so that you're fully armed to go out and do battle with the coconuts and doo-doo-doos. All right? So make that move. The link is at thepatriotthinktank.com. It'll take you right to the petition. And there's also the link, of course, to purchase gear there. So check out the shirts I have. They're actually pretty cool. They're good conversation starters. So don't forget to do that. I much appreciate it. But until next week, folks, and I will be on next week. There is no holiday. There's no debate being scheduled. So I am on next week. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for the cooperation, for the comments. You know, Carl, Jack, etc. You guys, Scott, been great. But it's time to go. I got family here, and I want to spend some quality time with them. So do what you got to do, folks. I'll see you next week. Live free, friend.